Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Elevation podcast that we'll be doing for the community. So the plan is once a month to do a community podcast with the Elevation team and friends. Very much an informal setting. So, by way of introduction, I'm Fakumia, the team lead of the Elevation Growth team. I am joined by some esteemed guests from the Elevation team themselves, and then we'll have some more surprise guests joining us later. But let's start with Jamie. So, hey, Jamie, who are you?
Hey everyone, my name's Jamie Reed. I am the strategy lead for Elevation team, and also overseeing sort of the direction of the marketing, PR, and communications.
Awesome. And then we've also got John. Hey, John, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm John Hargreaves. I'm business development lead, and I'll be working with Facol on how we take all of the excellent stories to market.
Awesome. So, Elevation, the proposal was passed in early October, I want to say. So we've been going for coming into 3 months now. Very much the focus was on building out the strategy, and we're now ready to phase into and scale up the execution, subject obviously to the council passing our latest proposal. But yeah, let's maybe go back and focus on that. So, Jamie, as our strategy lead, um, you know, I think it's fair to say it's been a long 3 months for the whole team. We've also got Greg, Ryan, Agnes who couldn't join us. But let's maybe start there. What is a strategy, Jamie, and how does one go
Yeah,
about creating one?
so this is a good question. I mean, look, a project like Elastos is, especially for someone like myself who's fairly new to the space. I mean, I can't keep saying that because I'm getting more and more attuned to it. But when I first was introduced to Elastos, I couldn't understand all the pieces, right? And how it functioned, and it was a bit of a complex sort of structure. I didn't know what a DAO was at the time, so having spent a lot of time recently just understanding how everything works and stuff, the first thing I had to do was I had to try to figure out a story for it, because I don't, I come from I guess a storytelling background, creative
Mm,
writing and things like that. And so for me, by framing what we're trying to do inside a story, it really helps me sort of just ground it. And so I can, if I don't understand the technology in some cases, or if I don't understand necessarily, how the ecosystem functions, as long as I can tie it back into the story of what we're trying to achieve, it's sort of, you can't know everything, right? And if you think about the audiences that we're talking to, devs don't necessarily understand every aspect uh, of sort of why people are interested in NFTs, and people that are interested in building NFT communities and stuff like that don't necessarily understand all the technical stuff either. And so I had, you kind of have to approach a strategy with a really high level view, because it's really going to be up to everyone else, like John and everyone else on our team, to go deeper into each of the aspects. And so for me, by keeping it kind of at a high level story level, it just, I think, allows me to frame the approach. And really, I guess strategy at the end of the day is just taking as much information as you can get about a problem, and
mm.
then mobilizing whatever resources are at your disposal to try to solve that problem. That's really, at the end of the day, what a strategy is. And so we first had to understand, well, what do we have at our disposal? What do we have? What are we working with? Um, so the first thing we did was we reviewed, going back to TLGG, and their recommendations. There was some core areas that they focused on, right? And it came down to leadership, operational, excellence, and building trust within the ecosystem, which, for all intents and purposes, are very kind of really high level.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to bring it down to the next level, but we needed to talk to everybody. And so we did about 20 video, voice calls, just interviews with everybody, the projects, all the contributors, the different, the foundation and everything. We sent out questionnaires. We did, targeted research in terms of the audiences, in terms of all of our competition. We did sort of audits of our website and of all of our channels. And we spoke to partners and looked at the regulatory, landscape and this during the process of the strategy, things like the FTX and like all of these major kind of things started happening as well. And so we had to take all this stuff into context and really try to help us focus on what we're doing. And the story that I ended up kind of landing on was, just really around the resiliency of Elastos and the ecosystem and all of the community and everybody that's sort of been sticking by. Because you look around at what's been happening in this space recently, and there's a lot of projects that are just quick to pull the plug, or that just are get sort of called out for not really having much under the hood to begin with. And this sort of the collapse that's been happening, the winter that we've entered, I think it's exposed a lot of projects and a lot of people to projects who maybe were latching on to certain celebrity or certain promises and basing their communities around just ideas and white papers, whereas Elastos really had a lot going for it, right? Everyone's been building and there's actually real technology behind it, and there's real people and real builders and real actually functioning products. And so but no one knows about them. And so I think that was where I really started latching onto the story, was this idea of resiliency. And then I looked at the word Elastos and what it means and where it comes from. And I started thinking about, well, what does it mean to be elastic, right? And to be elastic is to be able to take external forces and to basically, despite being distorted and resist those forces and try to be able to absorb those forces, with the idea that when the time is right, it essentially snaps back, right? And those forces then become a propelling power forward. And it kind of got me thinking, well, isn't that what's happening now? Is we've been sort of for 5 years been building quietly because of, for many different reasons. But now that the whole industry is sort of in a moment of reflection and coming to grips with like, what's a real project versus just vaporware, I think that is the moment where we're able to turn everything that we've been doing and all the pressure that we've been under back outwards. And I'm calling it sort of the Elastos snapping back. It's our moment where all of that force and energy is now going to just propel us forward, because we've been here all along. And this is an opportunity for us to really come out and stop being so maybe shy about what we've been building and start to have a much more stronger stake in the ground when it comes to the the ecosystem and what people can come and build within Elastos.
Sure. And I agree. I think it's quite important. Often we speak about the quality of the tech or the technology we have without there necessarily being a story behind it. I know early days we spoke about Web3 and, owning your own data, but it kind of lacked a story that kind of, pulled on the heartstrings. So I actually think, John, it'd be great to get your perspective here as someone who's kind of, you come from a PR marketing storytelling background of bringing products to the market. So I'm thinking, LinkedIn, Airbnb, Cardano, etc. And in recent years, you've focused more on, straight business development and sales. For you, why is storytelling so important? Because often a lot of people say, forget about PR, forget about marketing, just go and sell. But
well, I would say storytelling is so important right now, because where we are, we're at a tipping point. There's been a tremendous amount of energy and effort in building out the Elastos ecosystem. And if I was to sum up the business development approach, now is the time to make it real. Really show how Elastos delivers world-class solutions for all kinds of different use cases. And that's actually partly the challenge. There are so many solutions that Elastos can deliver. How do we get very specific and choose the right projects to show, what is, I believe in essentially absolutely game-changing platform and game-changing way of using technology to solve small problems, to solve some business problems, but at the end of the day, actually solve some of the world's biggest problems. Issues like sustainability, absolutely key to what all of my clients and everyone is really talking about. We're in Abu Dhabi this week, talking with their government about how can they build a sustainable finance platform for the future. And they really saw that Web3 technologies are absolutely vital to bringing the collaboration to solve, what is a global problem. So from the highest level down to very specific pieces, like how can Essentials help you control your digital identity? How can it help you monetize your data and footprint in Web3 so that you get the result with elasticity? How can it really showcase the ability to take control of your user content and turn that into money, not for Facebook, but for you? So all of those really specific, really powerful use cases are what we need to bring alive around the story Jamie outlined of snapping back. But we need to do it now, because now's the tipping point. If we don't do it in the next 6 to 12 months really strongly, then somebody else is going to start to pick up the clothes that belong to Elastos. So I'm really excited about not just telling the story, but making it real. And that would be my kind of catchphrase now. How do we make it real as we snap back?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I actually think maybe that's where Elastos previously went wrong. We were talking and building Web3 when people were focused on what is a blockchain and what is a coin. But now, Web3 is kind of a buzzword, that the market is a little crowded. So it's going to, the winners will likely be those that are able to articulate their story the best. So I think it kind of lines up well with us. So, again, we've been crafting that story and that strategy for several months. A lot of executions had to wait because of it, but we have done some. But I guess, Jamie, you mentioned we did all these interviews, research pieces, etc., painstaking. But what was the result of that? What came next?
Yeah, so I mean, we obviously identified, and I don't think any of this is new to our community, but there was some inconsistencies in terms of how we talked about things. We had way too many different channels and different, is the nature of, I think, the way Elastos came together and the ecosystem came together, that it was a little bit of a free-for-all at the beginning, and so everyone started kind of created their own Twitter feeds and stuff like that. So I think there's a need to bring a lot of stuff back together and really demonstrate and speak from the same story point of view. So there's incoherence, but then there was also just in terms of there was no measurement, there was no goal setting and things like that too, which I think is really important for us as an ecosystem to really kind of all align and have a shared purpose and common goal. And so that was also part of what we did, and we'll share a little bit more about like specific KPIs, I think, a little bit later in this conversation. But what John mentioned in terms of taking advantage of the moment, I think one of the key things that we saw was that up until recently, Elastos spent most of its time talking about itself for what it wanted to say, right? We were focused more on like the tech and what the tech would do and why the tech was cool, and that's fine. But we weren't necessarily paying attention to what was happening with our audiences and the changing landscape that was happening around us. And I think, we have to really kind of flip that script and take a human-centric approach and really talk, about what our audiences want to hear. And it's really about bringing what we want to say and what our audience want to hear together to build a narrative that I think is going to wake people up, not just to the solutions we can provide, but to how they can be participants in coming up with their solutions as well, and really try to, and that's what it is to build an ecosystem, is to kind of bring those things together. And so Elastos snapping back is sort of an internal message. It's sort of how we're galvanizing ourselves internally to kind of be like, this is our moment, we're going to snap back. But one of the first efforts that we made as a team was to start to build out the narrative for what we want to say externally, right? How do we talk about Elastos externally? And we've mostly been focusing on, the concept of owning your data and stuff like that. And I think that is definitely still relevant. But maybe, we saw that a lot of other competitors were also talking that way. We saw that that people didn't really, despite maybe saying that they care, at the same time, they're sharing all of this personal data on Facebook. So it's like, how much do you really care about owning your data? I think it's still a new concept for people. So that we had all these big challenges, and really what we ended up doing is identifying about 6 core priorities for the strategy and for what we needed to achieve. And so the first one was we needed to align internally as an ecosystem and really get on the same page and really kind of consolidate the way that we identify what's worth telling, like the stories worth telling, identify what the community cares about, bring that together, and make sure that we're communicating through all our channels in the right ways. And so that process is now more or less, coming to fruition, which is great. But now we're moving quickly into sort of the brand and repositioning the Elastos brand and trying to change that story. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Looking at, one of the other key areas was sort of moving away from talking about tech and thinking more about solutions. And again, this goes back to thinking about our audience. And so what are the problems out there in the world that businesses and that builders and people are facing, and what does Elastos have that can help solve that? And by thinking first about the audience, it's allowed us to kind of reframe our solutions, not necessarily as pieces of tech, but as a suite of technology that can serve a purpose that there's a need in the marketplace for. We have some more practical things we need to do. For example, we need to attract more devs and builders. We need to attract and fortify sort of get more nodes, I think, in the blockchain. And then one of the other things too that we saw as sort of a low-hanging fruit was, as we're building all of this stuff, we can't just be quiet, right? So we need to take advantage of the moment. And so what are the hero products that we have currently within Elastos that are ready, that can face forward to the market now, that we can start to use to start telling that story and to demonstrate what we're doing? So those are kind of like the 6 core areas of what we've been focusing on in getting started with this strategy.
Cool. And I think it's important to remember that Elevation isn't just a business development team. We've kind of taken on the mantle of growth of Elastos overall, so that is made up of marketing, PR, as well as business development. And it's great that we're able to go out to the market, listen to the needs of what people actually want from Web3, and then create that feedback loop with the different development teams. So now they're a lot more reactive in the way they build, as opposed to just building, something in a basement somewhere of what people may want rather than what they actually want. But I do want to talk a little bit about PR, because, a big challenge that Elastos historically has been, it either has had zero PR, or the PR it's had has been all internal, community driven, fragmented. And so it was important to kind of like not centralized, probably isn't the right word in this context, but kind of have a more consistency around that. And I know, Jamie, that is something you're working on a lot. And originally the plan was to work in partnership with the Info and the Herald team. Now, obviously, things have since changed. The Info team is no longer funded. We've now got the Digerati team led by the Secretary General, which is great. Albeit that team's a lot smaller. It's funded less than the old Info team. So it'd be good to get some context there, Jamie, around, what did that mean to your master plan around PR and marketing? But, what is your master plan around PR? Like, what would you like to get across to the community around how we're tackling that piece of the pie?
Yeah. Well, a couple caveats. First of all, the use of the word PR is difficult in Web3 because, John and I come from a background, I think, that where you earn attention and you earn, media. And first of all, the media landscape has changed a lot in probably the last 5 years more than ever, in terms of just how there's a blurring of earning and paying for attention. And so we're not just, it's impossible to just look at this space from a PR lens. You have to look at it from an integrated marketing lens. And it's about storytelling across all of the different touch points and different channels. And you're earning attention, but you're not earning attention necessarily through, the New York Times. You're earning attention through communities and through people saying, hey, you should check out Elastos. It's like this really cool place where people are building amazing things. That is the kind of endorsement, third-party endorsement that we're trying to get now. And you can do that in so many different ways. And so we have our channels, like I was saying before, they were fragmented. I think one of the first things I needed to do was, help us get over our hangups when it came to who owns what channels and who says, who says what and stuff. For me, I don't care about that stuff. For me, we're all one ecosystem. We need to speak with one voice. We need to make sure that we're aligned, whether it's different teams, or not, or one big team. I think the fact is that we have to all be aligned and come together. And so we needed to kind of develop a bit more of a publishing model where, like I said, we need to understand what the audience cares about and what they want to hear. And we have to, do our sort of internal research to understand, what are the builders building? What are the priorities from this team in terms of, the go-to-market strategy? And we have to take that and we have to meet in the middle somewhere. And so what we're going to start doing is having these sort of editorial meetings where the Digerati team, where the Elevation team, where, potentially, anyone else within the ecosystem can join, and we can sort of talk about what do we need to say, but then what's happening out in the world that we can latch onto, what are the storylines that we can talk about, and then delegate and send, we have and build a team that can actually execute on that. And so maybe it's a bunch of blog posts and a couple tweets, or maybe it's doing some PR, going to pay to have an influencer. There's so many different channels. You worry about the channels later. First, you worry about what's the story we're telling. So that's the first thing that I think we've done in this last sort of month or two, trying to get things together. And yes, some of the changes that were made during that process kind of threw a couple of monkey wrenches into it. But at the end of the day, like I said, it doesn't matter what the team's called or who's in that team. I think as long as we just come together and have an alignment, I think that's already solving one of the biggest challenges, which is the fragmentation that we saw within Elastos.
Yeah. And Jamie, to add to that, the marketing and PR has to be in lockstep with the business development. And really, we have to, this whole point about earning attention, when I say make things real, we get attention by really showing how fantastic the technology is, how it builds solutions, and we tell the world, and we tell the world again, and then we tell the world again. And we make sure that we, the whole ecosystem is excited. I know a lot of people have put years into developing these technologies and been through a big journey. And as I said, this is now the moment that we tell the world. And I think we all need to be aligned, and the business development needs to really drive those real projects that show solutions being delivered. So for me, that publishing model is absolutely crucial, because if we don't tell the world about all the fantastic stuff that we're developing and thinking about, then there will be, be a tragedy, to be honest. So because it's so strong. So I think that whole point about integration can't be overstated enough.
No, it's a good point, and I know I almost fell foul of that, right? Wanted to announce a partnership, but again, you guys rightly reminded me of, no, it needs to be part of the story and the narrative. If you just announce it, it's not going to get the traction it needs. And I think, we've made that mistake previously in Elastos. Elastos joined the WEF. At the time, it was a big deal, but we didn't tell anyone about it. There was no press release, there was no marketing behind it, no PR. It was literally just a blog post that kind of went into the internal vacuum of community, and it never got the traction it deserves. So it's, I understand it can be a challenge, kind of weighing up the priorities and the deliverables of marketing, PR, and BD, which is why it's good that, our team size is modest, so it's a lot easier for us to collaborate. Another thing, though, if I think, Jamie, of Elastos is, it's had its problems and it has issues, not just within Elastos, but more broadly around the way crypto is marketed or seen as, you're shilling technology that doesn't exist or certain messaging. And there's a slide I remember you created that was really striking and actually made me feel really good about being within Elastos. And it was the way we kind of flipped the narrative. So it'd be great to get some context there for the community, like, what does that mean, and maybe a couple of examples.
Yeah. So, I mean, I used to work at a global agency called TBWA, and their sort of methodology is built around this idea of disruption and trying to carve more, rather than trying to fight for a piece of the pie, expand the pie, right? And find new avenues and new ways of breaking ground. And so when we were doing the research, we really could see that, like, through our own fault, a lot of it, the whole ecosystem built around Elastos. Like, we were doing stuff that people started, claiming was they were the first at, and we're like, no, we did that 3 years ago, but no one knew. And so by then it's kind of like, it's like you can't kind of retroactively try to be like, no, we did it first. It sounds petty, right? So we need to kind of have a bit more confidence, I think, in our own marketing, and being able to get out there was part of it. And so this whole snapbacks moment, like, just again thinking, I'm imagining like that my brother used to take elastics and just pull them back, right, and then just smack them right on my arm, and just the amount of force and power that was in that, and that feeling of like, wow, I've never forgotten those moments where I like wanted to punch him in the face. That's the kind of snapback. Like, we need to punch this industry in the face and be like, we've been here, we know what we're talking about. All of these other ecosystems that have nothing more than a couple light papers are garnering millions of dollars in investment and crazy followings of people and stuff like that, and then those people end up having the rug pulled, and they get down on the whole industry. But like, we've been here all along, just building. So we need to kind of have that confidence. And so when I started thinking about what does that mean, what are the values that we currently exude versus what are the values we want to exude, what is the way that we want to go to the world, right? And so just taking things like, we used to have siloed thinking. We used to think in terms of technology, but also we used to think in what's the purpose of this technology, right? Like, what feeds sort of peer-to-peer communication technology, or is it like an opportunity to sort of decentralize the way that we all communicate, right? Like, I think it's just about taking another higher level thinking to everything. Again, we used to be much more sort of like tech centric. We need to be more human centric. I think people talk about us being old, and sort of like been around 5 years and stuff like that. But I think that, like, if we flip that and we kind of consider ourselves to be more like battle scarred, right? Like, we've made it through all of these ups and downs. I think that's at a time when people don't know who to trust within this industry. I think the fact that we've been able to kind of live through all of it, I think, should be something we can be proud of. I think, instead of thinking about the projects themselves, I think we should be talking more about the people and the vision of the people that are building these projects. I think that where we talked about before, the idea of owning your data, this is where the aha moment came. It's like, well, owning your data is a little bit stale, right? It's like, okay, your data, what is it? It's zeros and ones, and it's your birth date and things like that you don't have a lot of emotional attachment to. Well, the world is changing very fast. Everything is digitizing. Everything, people's lives are spent more than 50% now online. I think, I work from home on my computer, and then I go to my phone, and then I go from my phone to, doing my banking, and I order my groceries, and, everything is done within a digital realm, and it's only getting more and more as the technology moves forward, as Web3 starts to take hold. And we're at this, to John's point earlier, we're at this sort of like tipping point, this moment in time where Elastos has built the tools, has built, everything you need to not just own your data, but to sort of take control of what will become your destiny within this digital realm. And so I want to really shift that narrative from owning your data to owning your digital destiny. And what does that mean in terms of, you know, being able to latch on to your identity within this new realm of digital life that we're building. And then from that identity, all the solutions that we can provide and all of the things you can build, you know, are tied to a human, to a person. I think that is the sort of the secret sauce of what Web3 needs really at the end of the day. And so that's why we are seeing in the marketplace so much conversation right now about identity. Well, we need to be in that conversation. We have a whole chain dedicated to decentralized identifiers. And I think that's a huge underpinning opportunity for us to start talking about things like identity and privacy and, you know, how do we, you know, self-sovereignty. Like these are very ownable conversations and topics that Elastos should be very much a part of.
Yeah. And I was going to say, and that gets even bigger as we sort of start to move into a more immersive future. And some of the business development projects I'm working on, I mean, they're probably not quite metaverses yet. They will be in 2 or 3 years' time. But in that environment, your digital identity and having a decentralized identity that can be moved between different environments is absolutely critical. It's the key thing that all of the businesses and governments are looking for. How do we build those identities within these new worlds? And you know, when you look around, there's very, very few technologies that really help you do that. And when you look at Elastos, there's a whole suite of technologies that helps you do that, leading with the digital identity, but then expanding out into that future, which is coming at us very fast. So I think, you know, for me, this is a kind of tip of the spear into that new world which Elastos can lead. And it's again, it's going to be complex, but it's going to be a lot exciting to solve those business problems.
Yeah, and I think that for me is probably one of the main messages I'd want to get across to the community is, you know, Elastos is a beast in that there's a lot of technology there, a lot of different technology. You know, we've got this, you know, a highly unique main chain that benefits from the security of Bitcoin. You know, we've then got an ESC side chain, we've got an identity chain, we've got decentralized storage, a carrier network, a mature DAO. But when he actually comes to trying to sell Elastos, you know, that's a mouthful, you know, and you kind of need a way to kind of spark that conversation, pique that interest. And just saying own your data is not enough. I think digital destiny is great. But again, you know, you kind of need to take it from the PR to the BD. And I think that's where we will agree that, you know, the real sleeping giant in Elastos that we haven't really spoken about or taken notice of is the identity chain. And I think it's really smart the way the devs built it. And in my mind, and that's kind of why we're moving in this direction, is it's our real USP, you know, our unique selling point in that we have a dedicated blockchain that houses identities, right? And like we've already said, you know, the future of Web3 is people and individuals. And we need to avoid making the same mistakes that we did in Web 2, in that, you know, on average, a user has about 150 online accounts and passwords. You know, it's because it's centralized and applications often aren't interoperable. So, you know, Web 3 was supposed to get away from that. But, you know, you have all these different blockchains, you have different dApps. And so, you know, they're creating their own versions of identity solutions, you know, name services, local logins, utilizing Web2 wallets. But again, they're not really fixing it at a macro level. It's a solution specific to their need. But Web3 is supposed to be inclusive and it's meant to bring it all together. And that's what, you know, Rong's original vision of Elastos was. You know, he never said Elastos is going to be the winner. It's going to be one of many winners. And for Elastos, it's about bringing everyone together. And what better way to do that than through the identity chain? You know, we've got an identity chain that is both W3C, DIF compliant. It's built into the foundational roots of the actual chain itself. It's scalable. It can support everyone on Earth having a decentralized identity, as well as businesses, etc. And what's great about it is, it's interoperable. So we can now very comfortably, and John, I think you'll attest, it's suddenly made our conversations about Elastos much easier and smooth. We can just go to a Web2 company, a new project, even another blockchain, right? And say, hey, we love what you guys are doing, but we have a solution that is a problem for everyone. It is the identity. We can offer an identity. We've already built the technology. It works everywhere. Why not just adopt it and use it on your chain? And it just makes sense. And so now users don't need to worry about having, identities all over Web3 and kind of having that same problem with Web2. Nope. They just have one identity, it supports verifiable credentials, it's self-sovereign, you can do KYC, zero knowledge proofs to an extent, it just makes perfect sense. And then once you've piqued their interest, then you can kind of upsell is probably a strong word, but the other technology we have to offer, we have a dedicated sidechain for smart contracts. We can spin out more public chains, private chains for enterprises or governments. We have very innovative and unique storage solutions, in terms of Hive, a really interesting carrier network, peer-to-peer carrier network. And then, we've got really interesting people building on the project, and a few of them will join us soon, but that are taking the best of this different technology and showcasing it. And that's kind of, what we deem as our hero products. But yeah, I think really, we can't sell Elastos purely on the main chain because you can't deploy smart contracts on the main chain. What you can sell is the security of the main chain. So now you need to go a layer below. We can't necessarily sell it on ESC because ESC is even compatible. It's good. It's decent. It does what it needs to, but there's nothing unique or innovative about it, unless we can suddenly scale up significantly, the number of projects or users on it. It's not a real differentiator versus the competition. What we do have, though, is an identity chain, which everyone is lacking, everyone needs. And it's there, it's ready to go. So we just need people to plug into it. So, let's go in another layer below that. I guess, more from a strategic perspective, Jamie, digital destiny, like what does it mean? Like, what are some of the themes around how you would like us or we as a team have kind of agreed of how we can kind of go out there and educate people on some of the capabilities or use cases of the Elastos technology?
Sure. I think firstly, just to kind of also reiterate a little bit on what you were saying, Fakul, around sort of playing to our strengths. When we were looking at the moment in time that we had, right? There's a few ecosystems out there that have completely rebranded recently. That was an option for us too, right? Was like, okay, do we just change the name? Do we just change everything? Do we just focus on one thing? All of that. It felt like a terrible waste, right? Like it felt like to lose what we had going for us. And why do we need to rebrand when we can just sort of double down and refocus our energies on the things that, we're best at? And, going back, so we wanted to, owning your digital destiny isn't a huge departure from owning your data, right? Focusing on identity isn't a huge departure from Rong's original vision, right? It's really about just shifting slightly towards something that maybe has more resonance from an emotional appeal. And so when you take that and you layer it down, right, you think about what's a brand, what is a brand meant to do? Well, it's so that when despite the touch points, if we go to Web2 companies, if we go talk to experienced developers, if we go talk to governments, they're only going to remember one or two or three things maybe about Elastos. What are those things? And how do you make sure that when that dev that you talk to goes to a conference a couple of weeks later and hears about Elastos, is hearing a very similar story, even though it might be talking about a completely different aspect of our technology. It's all laddering up to something that starts to resonate in the hearts and in the minds of everybody. And what do we want that to be? Well, we want it to be that Elastos is where it's where you go. It's who's championing all of our ability to design our own destinies in this new Web3 space as it's building. Right now's the time to think about this, not later when a couple big corporations end up having all of the power. Now is the time for us to be championing everybody owning their own digital destiny. But what does that mean when we go out to the world? And so, we had to think about our solutions that we're kind of focused on. And we talked about identity, and your digital destiny at a high level is very much tied to your own personal identity. But then in terms of thinking about our solutions, well, we identified sort of 3 core areas of strength that we can go and build and we can go and sell. And one was sort of around a B2B approach, talking to Web2 companies, talking to governments, trying to use our sort of architecture to help companies that maybe want to use blockchain technology. They're not so interested maybe in the whole Web3 ecosystem at the moment, but there are solutions within just having a private blockchain that we can help to onboard them. And so, what that is really, we can talk about that from a technical standpoint, but what we really want to talk about is like, look, your industries are changing, right? You talk to healthcare companies, you talk to manufacturers, all of them are in some kind of peril right now in terms of how the future is going to look for their business. And so we can help them take control of their business destiny, right? And by helping them onboard new technology like blockchain or any of the Web3 services that we can provide. And underpinning all of that is the ability to have, unique identifiers. And so identity is part of what becomes, a business destiny for a customer. So we're looking at sort of our private blockchains and how we can spin out, whether it's for smart homes or for different commerce solutions, or whether it's just to track your supply chain. I think there's a huge opportunity to kind of onboard Web2 and other kinds of businesses that maybe are just trying to dip their toes into the blockchain technology. Then we look at sort of where we've always had a lot of strength is in sort of financial DeFi, right? And so how do we create sort of, rather than think about all of the different unique DApps that we have, it's about, how do we bring them together as a financial suite? And so what is a transparent and secure decentralized financial suite look like? Well, a lot of us right now are, have gone up the ups and downs. We've made some money, we've lost some money. The ones that are still sticking around are the ones that truly believe in the potential of this Web3 future. And so a lot of that is tied to what we're calling your financial destiny. And so again, when you're talking to potential builders, you're not going to them and saying, hey, look, you can build a new exchange on Elastos. You're going to them and saying, hey, we have all the tools you need to build sort of a platform that can help sort of direct and enforce the financial destiny of your audiences and stuff like that. It's like bringing along this ecosystem at a higher level. And then the last one, which is a little bit easier to kind of attach to, is sort of like the creative suite, right? So it's like, how do we create a verified metaverse for entrepreneurs that want to build sort of the next GameFi or the next the next creators of social networks? I think influencers is a huge opportunity. If you think about how you can own your own data and monetize your own data and own your own digital destiny, right? There's amazing platforms out there in Web2 that are just going gangbusters, but it's only a matter of time that someone starts building these in Web3. And we have all the tools to do that in such a way that's really going to empower people to own their digital destiny. So these are kind of like the 3 core, I guess, products that we're selling is like, business destiny, financial destiny, and your digital destiny. And they're all underpinned primarily by this concept of, your identity and how you can, the identity chain and how we can sort of really build self-sovereign identity solutions for almost any application.
Got it. No, that makes so much sense. And I think it's nicely bundled, right, under the whole identity. So it's just a natural fit for me. So I think, we also said, okay, again, we need to be able to demonstrate the technology, but also showcase products that have already established on Elastos, as a point of reference. So we can go out and say, hey, look, we've got these products, come and check them out. So, we looked across and, based on our analysis, there were a number of hero products and they're the ones that we're focusing on. So it's Elasticity, Essentials, feeds, the Ella box, not specifically the hardware version, more the light OS version, assuming that gets passed by the council, and then the Elastic Consensus as a whole, the new, what was previously known as DPoS 2.0, but we're now calling the Elastic Consensus. But I guess, John, from your perspective, I think the two that are the closest to from a ready market perspective is Elasticity and Essentials. So, what's your view been of both of those products and how we can, really use them to showcase, success stories on Elastos?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we said a huge amount of work's gone into both, many of the projects, but those two in particular seem to be coming to maturity, albeit in crowded markets. So if you take Essentials, there are many wallets, but when you look around and benchmark, there are not many wallets that can do the full service of functions that you can get from Essentials. So, for example, coming back to the identity, it really is a unique proposition that we can build from Essentials into the broader Web3 ecosystem. So I think it's really important that we stress that these products need a lot of work in terms of taking it to that next stage, taking it into the market, and I think the same applies for Elasticity. It's a really very clear proposition. It's got a number of different pillars to it, including the AI function. We've all seen how generative AI seems to have taken over their whole kind of conversation at the moment. So there's multiple different functions that we can highlight around it, the products. And the job is really now to make sure we very clearly differentiate them and don't make them look like me too, make them look like specifically groundbreaking products that happen to drive the Elastos ecosystem. And that's the really key thing is, although we're focusing on the product, they're really kind of this kind of tip of the spear that opens up the conversation that leads into the full suite of Elastos product. Now, some of those might be less mature for the moment, but certainly as the market is moving so rapidly forward and those products develop, they open up that much broader conversation about why Elastos actually is this suite of products that allows for a decentralized future. So the products are very impressive in the work that's gone into them, but I think it's important that they don't stand alone too, and that although we position them, we look to open up many other sales opportunities across the Elastos suite of products.
Absolutely. And I think we spoke about those two, but there's many other, but they're a good entry point into the ecosystem, especially Essentials. It immediately spotlights the identity solution, because you get one for free when you sign up. It's already got integrated fees. It's got integrated Elasticity, so you can go to Elasticity and do things you can't do on other NFT marketplaces. Generate AI art, mint it, store it on a decentralized cloud. You can demonstrate and use your verifiable credentials to give you certain access or gatekeep certain age restricted content. There's just so much there, and it's just about prioritizing the right build next and being able to succinctly bring it to the market and showcase it. I think that's where what we're really here for. It's a challenge, but definitely one we're up for. And then we'll separately do an article on this. But the Elastic Consensus, we've referenced it a few times. But what is that? That is basically what we're now calling the overall consensus of Elastos. To date, it's been quite complicated. You've got auxiliary proof of work, you've got DPoS. You've got the Cyber Republic, all these different things, and it can be quite jarring and quite difficult to follow. We're now umbrelling all of it under what we call the Elastic Consensus. It's unique architecture that provides flexibility and security through three underlying consensus mechanisms. So you've got the the beauty of the main chain with the auxiliary proof of work benefit from the power of Bitcoin's security. You can also use that as an argument to say that overall Elastos is carbon neutral, maybe even carbon negative. And then we've got the proof of stake mechanism. So DPoS 2.0, we're now rebranding that to bonded proof of stake because it's a lot more unique. You can you can stake certain tokens for a certain amount of time. The longer it is, the more you get. Really interesting. And then what was previously known as the Cyber Republic, that mechanism, we're now calling that proof of integrity, right? Because it's very much token holders nominating 12 entities or council members a year, and for them it's all about demonstrating their integrity. And I think they all come nicely together under the Elastic consensus. So there'll definitely be some, a mini campaign around that as part of the launch of, bonded proof of stake, or what the community know as the DPoS 2.0. So let's move on. I'm conscious of time. We're going well over. But, Jamie, if you were to, I guess, summarize very quickly, what were our core recommendations and kind of, our focus areas? And then maybe what I'll do is just, give a quick recap on what we've been up to, the last few months from an execution perspective, and what are some of the KPIs that we're measuring and reporting on a frequent basis to both the council and the core teams.
Sure. I think we're not trying to gloss over a couple other key areas, such as sort of attracting developers, trying to build out sort of more of the infrastructure through attracting more nodes and stuff like that. Those are all happening in parallel also, and that's what I think is complex about this. Is it's not sort of where typically you would try to do sort of one thing first and then do the next thing. There's a lot of parallel tracks that we're trying to achieve at the same time right now. But in terms of the core recommendations and the core strategic imperatives, I'd say bringing the ecosystem together, improving the communications internally, but then externally about how do we talk about ourselves. I think that's already started happening. We're onboarding some additional teams and talent, and I think we're going to be much better place in a week or so, just in terms of how we're able to start to communicate and create content and get out there. We also have some ideas for how we can kind of do some more a bigger public launch a little bit down the road as we start to build some momentum with partnerships and things like that. I think from a brand perspective, that's what we're my big focus right now is sort of trying to flesh out the narrative, and sort of also I think there's some visual cues that we want to start building as well. I don't know if we're going to do like a huge reskin of the website just yet, but there is a need to kind of start to build a bit more of a visual language that is associated with Elastos as well. And so starting to kind of get into that. In terms of the solutions and stuff, I think the team's already kind of been going out and having conversations using a lot of what we've built as a baseline, but we also need to start helping to pull together sales decks and presentations and the types of materials that we can put in front of potential customers. Again, probably thinking about what's the funnel, getting them to the website, and then where do they go? How do they, how do we help them from there? The hero products too, I think we're also, we've got something in the works for Essentials right now relating to, some of the functionality around the red packets, given it's Chinese New Year. So that's definitely an area. In terms of growing and utilizing and attracting developers, this is one that is, we need to follow a process, I think, because no one even understands, let alone knows about Elastos. We need to get them to know about Elastos, then understand why Elastos could be a good place for them to go, and then they have to believe that Elastos is where they should spend their energy. And then once they get here, how do we create an experience for them, right? We talk about creating like a white glove experience for developers. I think that's going to be super important. How do we make sure that when developers show up, that there's there's other developers here that can help them, that can teach them, that can hold their hand and kind of lead them along in terms of like, hey, you really should check out some of these functionalities Elastos has. And I think that's going to be really important in building the ecosystem as well, is really making sure that the builders that come just really feel like this is a great place, a great community to build in. And then lastly, it's really about fortifying the decentralization of Elastos, and really kind of, it's hard for us to go out there and talk about the strength of our ecosystem, when we only have so many nodes, and the strength of our ecosystem isn't maybe as strong as it could be. And so we need to kind of build that back up. And I think that's going to happen as well in parallel. And I think through our partnerships and stuff like that, we're hoping to kind of make that more robust as well. So that's kind of, a very high level, top line, quick overview of sort of what the strategy entails and what we're doing and working on currently. And so it's all happening in parallel.
And I think, if I was to add from like a more granular admin / execution level, whilst the team's predominantly or primarily been focused on building out strategy, we've also tried to spend as much time on, at least doing low level execution, or, laying the foundation or planting the seeds with different projects. But, just to kind of get up and running, we started from almost a position of zero, because there's never been a BD team historically, or a growth team. So, just things like setting up a CRM tool, uploading all the historical leads from like the Elastos Academy, what CR regions previously had, the old Web3 events they did, like setting up email subscriptions, the ability to push marketing directly out to these individuals. That all takes time, but it needed to be done. I won't go again into the competitor analysis, but like spend a significant amount, painstaking time there, but also identifying and beginning to plug some of the service gaps, so the other projects take for granted, things like accessibility of our bridge, pricing oracles, the ability to index data, multi-sig support, automation of smart contracts, even data being up to date on different external sites. All of that needs to be tackled. Scoping out the white glove framework, the different channel audits, brand messaging, hero products, developers. It takes a lot of time. But we do want to say to the community, yes, we haven't publicly announced any partnerships, but we've begun speaking, and that was kind of as a secondary objective, whilst the primary was to build out the strategy. But in terms of the different BD conversations we've had, and we've ramped them up this month, and we're going to full mode execution after the council hopefully approves the next tranche of funding. But we've probably spoken to, I don't know, anything between 45 and 50 projects where we think there's a strong chance, or we think it's worth having a conversation around either a partnership or using Elastos technology. So again, I don't mean just sending out cold call emails. I mean actually sitting down and conversing with them. So it scopes across different GameFi projects, DeFi projects. A key area for us is Web 2 to Web 3. So Web 2 companies that are interested in Web 3, kind of helping them to tip their toe in the water. Security, marketing, development, all of these things we need. Other ecosystems we've spoken to, how can we partner with them? Ton of infrastructure projects, also education and investment, and a number of exchanges. That's kind of been more like on the side as they've approached us. But really, it's just starting, and I think there's a lot more to come. But some of those means or ramps to do that just didn't exist. So, John, I think it's fair to say, if we're pushing for the B2B market with Elastos and its technology, which makes sense, right, for selling an identity solution, yes, it's for the end consumer, but you need other projects to adopt it. And, the best way to really sell, other than in person, is probably through LinkedIn. And we didn't even have a LinkedIn page, or there was a LinkedIn page that was completely outdated. But, John, I guess from your perspective, like as someone who actually brought LinkedIn to the market and knows how to sell on LinkedIn, what are some of the strategies or some of the things you need to consider when you're trying to, reach the business audience, to try and sell, what we have, right? Technology.
Yeah. Well, you need first of all, you need to treat it as a full ecosystem. So partnerships, other people who come along to endorse you, influencers, as well as our own kind of narrative and story that Jamie outlined. It's really getting other people to connect with us, to sell it and start pushing us across the platform. We can't do it all ourselves. It's really about that network effect. And the more partners we bring in, the more customers we sell, the more influencers we manage to bring on board, then that all sets this flywheel going. Now, LinkedIn is a great platform, particularly if you're targeting Web 2, to start that moving. We've also got to think about, we know Twitter, we know it's useful in some ways, it's got its downsides, but there are Web 3 social media platforms that, in addition to our own, that are starting to become very important around the Fediverse and different ways of amplifying content and reaching niche audiences. So it's really about building that whole ecosystem. As I say, LinkedIn's a great starting point. And one of the things we need to do is start to pull some of those Web 2 customers actually into a Web 3 environment. Now we can bring them onto our own platforms, but also I think there are partner platforms as well that we need to work with. So for me, it's really understanding that we're in a kind of multi-sided world and success depends on building that model. And as I say, LinkedIn's a starting point and a really powerful one for Web 2, but it's not the end point at all.
Definitely. I know, it makes a lot of sense. And I think, we were keen to do this podcast just to kind of give the community a bit of a flavor of how we've approached, growth for Elastos, so the strategy and then going into execution. Obviously, we couldn't go through the many decks we've created. The council and the core teams have seen our 100-page decks, strategy, the KPIs, etc. But what we've covered is some of the key themes from it. But if I was to speak to like the KPIs of what we're tracking as a team, and we're reporting to the council and the core teams, and what we've kind of committed to, it's simple things like just making sure we meet them, either on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis. It's providing ad hoc updates, doing at least quarterly AMAs with the community as a whole, providing these videos at least once a month, as well as a written update once a month. But then, you have two sets of goals, right? You have what are known as external output goals. So they're things that are clear and quantifiable. So, for example, like the number of press releases you do, or the number of events you hold, or the number of impressions you receive. So we're doing all sorts of things. So, for example, implementing this new editorial framework that Jamie described, committing to generating a certain number of impressions for the ecosystem. So I think it's about 2 million or so. Having online events and forums, writing a certain number of blog posts, social posts in partnership with the Digerati team, creating like videos, creating a dashboard, right? Like, Jamie, I think you were shocked by the fact that we don't even have a dashboard to track, the impact of, socials, social media, PR, etc. Rolling that out, making sure the technology is up to date. So, we've gone back to the core team and told them, you need to upgrade certain parts of the infrastructure, or we need something that hasn't existed before. Making sure that we attend industry events, because that's where a lot of business is done. Speaking to other projects, investors, absolutely. But then also, just the boring stuff like tracking it all in the CRM tool. So then when we go and push out content, it's easy to do. But then ultimately, why are we doing all of that? It's so it leads to certain outcomes, right? So that's kind of what we call the external outcome goals. So what are we actually trying to achieve? And for us, it's, changing, a change of awareness or understanding or behavior when it comes to Elastos. So, first and foremost, it's raising awareness amongst developers, investors, and users of all of the Elastos technology. and its key projects. So, we're looking to like increase that twofold. We're looking to increase understanding of the Elastos ecosystem across the global developer community, shifting the whole attitude around Elastos, right? So the snapback, we want that to be the message to people, like to really understand what is it that we're trying to do. Not, oh, this is a 5-year-old project, they haven't necessarily spoken a lot, they've been quiet. No, we're not a dino coin, we're a real tangible project. But then also, we've set targets around like number of developers we want on board into the ecosystem, the number of token holders there are, the number of essentials users there are, the number of DID users there are, number of feeds, Passar, Elasticity users there are, Elabox. Very importantly, the number of validators there are. So as part of the new Elastic consensus and the new staking mechanism or consensus mechanism, we're targeting a certain number of validators and ensuring that a percentage of them are brand new entities, not just existing projects in the ecosystem. We're targeting certain participation rates when it comes to staking. So there's a ton, we're kind of tracking all of this, and ultimately what we're doing is we're being as transparent as possible, saying, hey, look, these are all the goals and the KPIs and the outputs that we're measuring, and we're sharing that. And then it's ultimately for the community, the council, or the core teams to determine if we're successful and if we should continue. But in our mind, it's been difficult, kind of taking a project that's just never really done PR, marketing, or BD, and then suddenly inserting it after it's been built 5 years during a bear market where people have already forgotten about Elastos, just changing their minds. But I think, broadly what we've created and the way we're looking to position it around identity just makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of synergies there. So I'm very optimistic that the team will be successful. But I guess, any closing thoughts from yourself, Jamie or John?
I would just say that, if to the community that has stuck around, that has through ups and downs and a lot of sort of challenges, let's say, within Elastos, thank you first of all, and also this is an ecosystem play, and we do recognize the importance of the community and that we need to grow the community, right? Like the community we have is solid and has been stuck around, but I mean, obviously has some issues as well, because for 5 years, I think there's some impatience happening, and we just, a couple things is just, don't worry, we're getting there. We're getting there. We're going to be, working very hard to try to, to communicate and to build all this and execute this strategy. So just know that we're not sitting around twiddling our thumbs. There is some stuff that we have to do behind the scenes, but more importantly, as we start to bring out this narrative, as we start to talk about digital destiny and identity and these kinds of core themes, we could really use your help as well, to help to disseminate that, use some of the same language. And so what we're going to do is, as we formalize the narrative, we'll share it with everybody, and we want everybody to use it, and we want everybody to talk the same language. And so as we go out and we bring new people in, doesn't matter who they talk to, they're hearing the same sorts of things, that Elastos is a great place to build the amazing ecosystem that's focused on, empowering me to take charge of my digital destiny with a really strong identity sort of platform to build off of, and amazing tools to build pretty much anything that we could imagine within the Web3 space. These are, if that's all people can know about Elastos, then we've done our job, and we could really use your help to make sure that comes through.
Cool. Thank you, Jamie.
Yeah, and I think the only thing I'd add to that really is this flywheel model absolutely rests on the community, and I'm really looking forward to working with the community to really start to drive the flywheel forward. There's so much there to be celebrated and really communicate around. So as Jamie said, thank you for all the support today, and I really think it will be a fantastic opportunity to get the flywheel moving with everyone in the community. It's the center point of everything.
Amazing. Thanks, John. And yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Happy Chinese New Year for those that celebrate it. Welcome to the Year of the Rabbit. We will be announcing a little competition around it in the coming days. But yeah, hopefully you'll hear from us some more. And yeah, we'll get back to work. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.